Sir, if I ask you to lend me a small amount of money, I swear I'll pay every dollar back. But if I don't have it tonight, my mother will die. It is Sabon. The words came out of Ava Johnson's mouth in a broken rush, her voice shaking so badly she barely recognized it as her own. She stood near the edge of the living room, careful not to step too far onto the marble floor, her posture rigid, hands clenched together in front of her uniform. Years of training had taught her how to be invisible. Tonight, invisibility was no longer an option. Richard Hale turned slowly from the fireplace. The room was quiet except for the low crackle of burning logs. Expensive, silence, thick, controlled, untouched by urgency. Ava felt it press down on her chest. "You want to borrow money," Richard said at last. His tone was calm, almost distant. "Yes, sir," Ava replied quickly. "Borrow, not beg. I'll sign anything. I'll work extra hours. I'll pay it all back." Before Richard could respond, sharp heels clicked against the floor from the hallway. "What is going on here?" The voice cut through the room like glass. Elaine Hale stepped in, impeccably dressed despite the late hour, her eyes already narrowed with suspicion. She took in the scene in seconds, her husband standing still, the maid frozen near the door and her lips tightened. "Why is she still here?" Elaine demanded. "Didn't her shift end an hour ago?" Ava swallowed. "Ma'am, Elaine raised a hand. "Don't speak. Do that." She turned to Richard. "You do realize how this looks, don't you? A young maid cornering you alone at night?" Ava felt her face burn. "That's not what I said. Don't speak," Elaine snapped, now fully facing her. "I've seen this before. Poor girl with a tragic story. Always the same script." And Richard frowned. "Elaine, that's enough. We want to know." "No, it isn't," she shot back. "You're being manipulated. Richard, she's lying to you." 18. "I'm not lying," Ava said, her voice breaking despite herself. "My mother is in the hospital. She needs surgery tonight. I can prove it. Please." And Elaine laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "Prove it? Of course you can. People like you always can." She stepped closer, her eyes cold. "You think we don't know how this works? Guilt, tears, gratitude, then more money, then silence." "I be so." Ava shook her head desperately. "I swear on my life, I'll repay everything. I'll work until I collapse if I have to. I'll be grateful for the rest of my life." "OD, that's exactly the problem," Elaine said. "Grateful people are dangerous. They cling." "Of Elaine," Richard warned, but she was already too close. Ava dropped to her knees without thinking, the sound of fabric against marble echoing in the room. "Please," she whispered, humiliation flooding her. "I'll owe you forever. I'll never forget this. I just need my mother to live." For a moment, even Richard looked stunned. Elaine did not. "Disgusting," she said. "Get up. This isn't some street corner. Our gran." She reached down suddenly, grabbing a fistful of Ava's hair. Ava gasped in pain. "Please, ma'am. Out," Elaine snarled, yanking hard. The world tilted. Ava's knees slipped on the smooth floor, and she was dragged several feet before losing her balance entirely. She cried out as her shoulders slammed into the edge of a table, her body collapsing onto the cold stone near the doorway. Richard moved instinctively. "Elaine, stop," but it was already done. Elaine released her, breathing hard. "Get out of my house," she said. "If I ever see you try this again, I'll have security deal with you." "I was go techie." Ava lay on the floor, stunned, pain radiating through her arm and hip. Slowly, she pushed herself up, ignoring the tears streaming down her face. She did not look at Elaine again. She couldn't. She looked at Richard. "I wasn't lying," she said quietly, "and I would have paid you back. Every dollar. It stung." Then she turned and limped out the door. The house fell into silence once more. Elaine exhaled sharply. "Honestly, these people..." "Everyone's saying..." Richard didn't respond. Something about the way Ava had looked at him, no anger, no accusation, just exhaustion refused to leave his mind. You shouldn't encourage that behavior, Elaine continued. It's dangerous. I create too. Richard set his glass down. Untouched. You hurt her. She deserved it. When 45, he turned to her slowly. Did she? Elaine scoffed. Don't tell me you believe her. It was working 10-10. I don't know, he said. And that's the point. Ivan, Elaine stared at him. Incredulous. You're choosing her story over mine. I'm choosing the truth. Richard replied evenly. Elaine's eyes hardened. Then find it. But don't say I didn't warn you. Tuark. She turned and walked away, heels clicking back down the hallway. Richard remained where he was for a long moment. Staring at the closed door Ava had disappeared through, he replayed her words again and again. Not the plea, but the certainty. I will pay it back. He picked up his phone and made a call. Within minutes, he had the name of the hospital. St. Mary's. He looked down at his immaculate hands. Then at the smear of blood he suddenly noticed on the marble floor near the door. For the first time in years, Richard Hale felt something shift inside him, not guilt, not pity, but responsibility. And this time, he did not walk away. If Ava's story moved you, please like this video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because someone near you might be watching this story too. Ava did not remember how she got down the driveway. She remembered the cold more than anything else, the way it bit through her thin uniform as she stumbled past the iron gates. The way the night air burned her lungs when she tried to breathe too deeply. Every step sent a sharp jolt of pain through her shoulder where she had hit the table, down her side where she had landed hard against the marble floor. But pain was familiar. She could walk through pain. What frightened her was the emptiness. The house behind her stood silent and luminous, all glass and light and certainty. It did not look like a place where someone had just been dragged by the hair and thrown out. It never did. That was the cruelest part. Violence that left no visible mark on the walls always belonged to the one who fell, not the one who pushed. She reached the bus stop at the corner and sat down heavily, pressing her arm to her chest. Her fingers came away damp. Blood. Not much, but enough to make her stomach tighten. She closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe slowly, counting the seconds the way the nurse at St. Mary's had taught her mother to do during coughing fits. In, hold, out. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. For one brief, foolish second, she thought it might be him. That Richard Hale had followed her out. That he had stopped her. That he had said this was all a terrible mistake. It was the hospital. Ms. Johnson, the nurse said, her voice polite and distant. We need to confirm whether you'll be able to make the deposit tonight. Ava swallowed. I'm trying, she said. Please, just give me a little more time. And there was a pause, papers rustling, a keyboard tapping. We can hold the operating room until midnight, the nurse replied. After that, we'll have to reassess. Oh, midnight. Ava looked up at the dark sky, at the stars barely visible through the city's glow. Midnight was not a lot of time. It was barely anything at all. I understand, she said. Thank you. Right. She ended the call and pressed the phone against her forehead. Her hands were shaking now. No matter how hard she tried to stop them, she thought of her mother's face earlier that evening. Pale but still trying to smile. Still apologizing for being a burden. Don't bow for anyone. Baby, her mother had whispered. Promise me. Ava let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She had broken that promise tonight in more ways than one. The bus arrived with a hiss of air brakes. She climbed on, ignoring the curious glance from the driver when he noticed her limp and the tear in her sleeve. She took a seat near the back, away from everyone else, and stared out the window as the city slid past. She had always known her place. That knowledge had been drilled into her early by teachers who expected less, by managers who spoke slowly to her as if intelligence were contagious, by customers who looked through her instead of at her. At the Hale residence, knowing her place had been an unspoken rule. Don't linger. Don't ask questions. Don't exist beyond the work you do. Tonight, She had broken that rule too. Her shoulder throbbed in time with the passing streetlights. She wondered if she should go to the emergency room herself, but the thought felt almost obscene. She could still walk. She could still breathe. That was more than her mother could say. When the bus dropped her near her apartment, Ava moved carefully up the narrow steps, gripping the railing with her good hand. The hallway smelled of fried food and cleaning solution. Normal smells. Familiar smells. She unlocked her door and stepped inside the small, dim space she shared with her mother. The apartment felt wrong without her. Ava sank onto the couch and finally let herself cry, not loudly, not dramatically, but in silent, shaking breaths that left her dizzy. She pressed her face into the worn fabric cushion, willing herself to be stronger, to think clearly. She needed money. Fast. She thought of coworkers, distant relatives. The small savings account she already knew was empty. She thought of payday loans and the kind of interest that trapped people for decades. She thought of selling her phone, her laptop, the few pieces of jewelry her mother had insisted on giving her over the years. None of it would be enough. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from an unknown number. Saint, Mary's hospital has confirmed your mother's condition. I'm on my way. Ava stared at the screen, her heart slamming so hard she felt dizzy. Richard Hale. Her first instinct was disbelief. Her second was fear. She imagined Elaine's face, twisted with anger. She imagined this was some cruel extension of the humiliation, a way to confirm that Ava had lied, to prove her desperation false. Her hands hovered over the screen. She typed, erased. Typed again. You don't have to come. I understand if you changed your mind. The reply came almost immediately. I haven't. Ava sat back, stunned. She did not know what that meant. She did not know what it would cost her. All she knew was that something had shifted, and she had no control over it anymore. Across town, Richard Hale drove through streets he rarely noticed. He had lived in this city for decades, yet entire neighborhoods felt unfamiliar now. Rows of modest buildings, flickering streetlights, people waiting at bus stops with their shoulders hunched against the cold. He caught sight of a laundromat on the corner, its windows fogged with steam, and something twisted uncomfortably in his chest. He thought of Elaine's words. These people. The phrase unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. At St. Mary's, the fluorescent lights were harsh and unflattering. Richard gave his name at the desk and watched the receptionist's expression shift from indifference to recognition, to something like practiced politeness. This way, Mr. Hale, she said. Ava saw him before he saw her. He looked out of place in the waiting room, tall and composed in a tailored coat, hands folded neatly in front of him. People glanced at him, then looked away, instinctively aware of the imbalance he carried with him like a shadow. He noticed Ava's injury immediately. What happened to your arm? He asked quietly as he approached. She stiffened. It's nothing. Whatever. He looked at the bruise darkening beneath the tear in her sleeve. That didn't come from nothing. Too mated. She hesitated, then shook her head. Please, don't. Izzy, he nodded once, respecting the boundary. How is your mother? They're waiting, Ava said. Until midnight. This day, Richard checked his watch. There was still time. He spoke with the admissions staff, his tone calm but firm, asking questions, requesting documents, confirming details. Ava watched from her chair, her emotions a tangled mess of hope, shame, and fear. Every polite sentence felt like a miracle and an accusation at the same time. When he returned, he met her eyes. I verified everything, he said. Your mother's condition, the surgery, the cost, with C2. Ava's throat tightened. And you weren't lying. I fanned. The words hit her harder than any insult Elaine had thrown at her. She nodded, unable to speak. Richard took a breath. I need you to understand something, he said. What happened tonight was wrong. And Ava looked down at her hands. I shouldn't have stayed after my shift. That's not what I meant. Well. She looked up then, surprised. I'm going to cover the deposit, he continued. Tonight, we'll discuss the rest later. eyes. Her breath caught. "Sir, this is not charity," he said, echoing her earlier words. "It's a loan. On your terms." Eyes. Tears spilled over despite her best efforts. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll pay you back. I promise. Every dollar. I believe you," he said simply. For the first time since she had fallen to her knees on that marble floor, Ava felt something loosen inside her chest. Not relief. Not yet. But possibility. Somewhere down the hall. A nurse called her name. Midnight was still approaching. But for the first time that night, Ava was not facing it alone. The waiting room clock clicked over with an unforgiving sound, each second announcing itself as if it mattered more than the last. Ava sat rigid in the hard plastic chair, her injured shoulder burning dully beneath her sleeve, her eyes fixed on the swinging doors that led to the operating wing. Every time they opened, her breath caught. Every time they closed again, disappointment settled deeper into her chest. Richard sat a few seats away, posture straight, hands folded loosely, his expression unreadable. He had made the calls, signed the paperwork, spoken to administrators in low, efficient tones. The deposit had been accepted, the surgery approved. On paper, everything was moving forward. On paper, "You can sit closer if you want," Ava said quietly after several minutes. The words surprised her as much as they surprised him. She had not meant to offer comfort. She barely had any left for herself. Richard looked at her, then shifted one seat closer without comment. "They said she'll be under anesthesia for at least 3 hours." Ava continued, her voice thin. "Sometimes longer. It depends on how much damage there is." "Tenchery, how long has she been sick?" he asked. Ava hesitated. This was not a question she usually answered honestly. "Longer than she admitted," she said. She kept saying it was just a cough, that it would pass. And you believed her?" "I wanted to go," Ava replied. Believing her was easier than forcing her to stop working. Richard nodded slowly. He understood that calculus, the choice between truth and survival. He had made versions of it himself, just dressed in better suits. Across the room, a man paced back and forth, his shoes squeaking faintly against the floor. A woman whispered urgently into her phone, her voice breaking as she repeated the same reassurances. The waiting room was full of quiet negotiations with fate, all of them unseen, unrecorded. "This place never sleeps," Ava said, almost to herself. "But it never really rests either." "Is afraid." Richard followed her gaze. "Hospitals are honest," he said. "They don't pretend life is fair." Ava gave a small, humorless smile. "Neither do poor people. Michael." He glanced at her then, surprised by the bluntness. She met his eyes steadily. No apology in her expression this time. She had nothing left to protect. Minutes passed. Then more. At 11:47 p.m., a nurse approached them, holding a clipboard. Ava stood so quickly her vision swam. "Ms. Johnson?" the nurse asked gently. "Yes." "Dzeng. They've taken your mother into surgery," she said. "You can't see her right now, but the doctor will update you as soon as there's progress." Ava nodded, gripping the edge of the chair until her knuckles turned white. "Thank you." As the nurse walked away, the reality settled in. There was nothing left to do now. No more pleading. No more bargaining. Just waiting. Richard checked his watch again, then looked at Ava. "Have you eaten?" She blinked. "I don't think so." End quote. "Today." "Then today." She shook her head. He stood. "I'll get you something." Resand. "You don't have to." "I know," he said. "I want to go." He returned a few minutes later with a paper cup of coffee and a wrapped sandwich from the vending area. Ava stared at it as if it were something foreign. "I might get sick," she warned. "That's all right," he said. "Eat anyway." Inisoded. She managed a few bites before her stomach rebelled. But even that small effort made her feel more anchored to her body, to the room, to the moment. "Thank you," she said again, more quietly. Richard nodded, then hesitated. About earlier, he began. Ava stiffened immediately. You don't need to explain. I wasn't going to two-way, he said. I was going to apologize. Oh, she looked up sharply. For not stopping it sooner, he continued. For letting someone speak to you that way. For what happened to you? Ava's throat tightened. She's your wife. Aid. That doesn't make it acceptable. Is these not to do and paste in this? The words hung between them, heavier than any promise. Ava looked down at her hands, at the faint tremor she could not control. She thought I was trying to trap you, Ava said after a moment. People always think that if someone like me gets close to someone like you, it has to be for a reason. Is artist, and was it? Richard asked gently. Ava met his gaze again. Yes, she said. The reason was that my mother is dying. End quote. He did not look away. They sat in silence after that, the kind that no longer felt hostile. The clock crept closer to midnight, then past it, unnoticed. Time lost its sharp edges and became something softer, heavier. At 1:12 a.m., the doors opened again. A man in scrubs stepped into the waiting room, his expression tired but focused. Ava was on her feet before he could say a word. I'm Dr. Lawson, he said. Are you Ms. S. Johnson? Yes, she breathed. Is she? She's still in surgery, he said. It's complicated. There's more damage than we initially thought. Ava's heart sank. But she's alive? Yes, he said firmly. She's fighting. But I need to be honest with you. Recovery will be long. She won't be able to return to her previous work. Ava nodded slowly, absorbing the words. Work could be replaced. Her mother could not. Will she wake up? Ava asked. Dr. Lawson paused. I believe she will, he said. But it may take some time. If we have do that. Richard stepped forward. What does she need? The doctor glanced at him, recognizing the name from the paperwork. A safe environment, no chemical exposure, follow-up treatment, and rest. iOS. Richard nodded. She'll have it. We have to stay 9. Ava turned to him, startled. Sir, we'll talk later, he said quietly. Focus on her. 90 yes, Doctor. Lawson gave a brief nod and returned through the doors. Ava sat back down, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Richard sat beside her again, closer this time. She did not move away. I don't know what happens after tonight, Ava said softly. I don't know how I'm supposed to fix all of this. Richard looked straight ahead. You don't have to fix everything tonight. If you do, she laughed weakly. That's easy for you to say. Which is not quartered. He turned to her. You're right, he said. It is, but it's also true. Ava closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her in waves. Somewhere beyond the doors, machines beeped steadily, keeping time for a life she loved more than her own. For the first time since she had been dragged across that marble floor, Ava allowed herself to lean back, just a little, trusting that if she fell asleep, someone else would stay awake. Ava woke to the sound of soft footsteps and the low murmur of voices. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The sterile smell of disinfectant filled her nose, and a dull ache pulsed through her shoulder. Then memory rushed back all at once. The marble floor, Elaine's hand in her hair, the hospital lights, the waiting room. She straightened abruptly, panic flaring. My mother, she's stable, Richard said quietly. He was standing a few feet away, speaking with Dr. Lawson near the nurse's station. When Ava spoke, both men turned toward her. Richard walked back and took the seat beside her, keeping his voice low. She's still sedated, he continued, but the surgery is over. The doctor says the next 12 hours are critical. But she made it through the night. 18 Vermender. Ava pressed her hand to her mouth. The relief hit her so suddenly her eyes burned. She nodded, afraid that if she tried to speak, she would break apart completely. Dr. Lawson approached, clipboard tucked under his arm. Ms. Johnson, he said gently. You can see her for a few minutes. She won't be awake yet. But hearing familiar voices can help. We have to bend this comment. Ava stood, her legs unsteady. Richard rose as well, instinctively reaching out when she swayed. His hand hovered near her elbow, then stopped, giving her space. I'll wait here, he said. She nodded gratefully and followed the doctor down the corridor. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of monitors. Ava's mother lay still beneath thin blankets, tubes and wires surrounding her in quiet efficiency. Her face looked smaller somehow, fragile in a way Ava had never allowed herself to see before. Ava moved to the bedside and took her mother's hand carefully. I'm here, she whispered. You did it. You're still here. Was no Johning. Her mother didn't respond, but Ava felt the warmth of her skin, the faint pressure of life still present beneath the machines. Tears slid silently down Ava's cheeks as she leaned closer. I'm sorry I didn't make you stop working sooner, she murmured. I'm sorry I let you carry everything alone. She stayed like that for several minutes, speaking softly, recounting small memories, burnt toast on Sunday mornings, laughter over old movies, the way her mother used to hum while folding laundry, ordinary things, human things. When the nurse signaled that time was up, Ava squeezed her mother's hand one last time and stepped back. I'll be right outside, she promised. The waiting room felt different when she returned. Less hostile, less sharp. Richard was speaking on his phone, his tone controlled but intent. Yes, he said. I want a full report. Dates, vendors, safety records, everything. Is she? He ended the call and turned to Ava. How is she? She's still here, Ava said. That's enough for now. It is tenning, friend. He nodded. Dr. Lawson said she'll be moved to recovery shortly. You can sit with her later today. End quote. Ava hesitated, then gestured toward her arm. I should probably clean this up. Everyone, Richard frowned. You're injured. Way, it's not serious. That's what people always say when it is no. Is a better to myself. He guided her gently toward the triage area. Ava didn't argue this time. The adrenaline was gone, and the pain had sharpened into something undeniable. As the nurse cleaned the scrape on her shoulder and wrapped it carefully, Ava stared at the wall, embarrassment creeping in. You didn't deserve that, Richard said suddenly. She glanced at him. I know. Yet, he seemed surprised by her certainty. I've spent my whole life being told what I deserve. Ava continued quietly. Eventually, you learn the difference between what people say and what's true. Was not to him. The nurse finished and stepped away. Richard watched Ava flex her arm experimentally. I spoke to my driver, he said. He's outside. I can take you home. Or wherever you need to go. As Ava shook her head. I'm staying. In quote. With your mother? Yes. I come dine. He nodded. Then I'll stay too. .coms to visidios. She looked at him sharply. You don't have to. I know, he said. But I'm not leaving. They returned to the waiting area as dawn crept through the narrow windows, washing the room in pale light. The city outside was waking up, unaware of the small war that had been fought overnight. After a long silence, Ava spoke again. Why are you doing this? Richard didn't answer immediately. He watched a janitor mop the floor, the slow, methodical movements grounding in their simplicity. Because last night, he said finally, I realized how easy it is to mistake distance for innocence. Well, she studied him. Your wife doesn't see it that way. End quote. No, he agreed. She doesn't. See. Ava lowered her gaze. She thinks I was trying to trap you. Richard let out a slow breath. Elaine believes that everyone is always trying to take something. We have this planned. And you? Ava asked. He met her eyes. I think some people are just trying to survive. It is S. They sat quietly after that. Nurses came and went. Doctors spoke in hushed tones. Time stretched and contracted in strange ways. Later that morning, Dr. Lawson returned with an update. She's responding well, he said. There's a long road ahead, but the immediate danger has passed. Iward, Ava exhaled shakily. Thank you. There's working bald and with tension. As the doctor walked away, Richard stood. I need to make a few more calls, he said. About her care. And about other things. Ava nodded. I understand. Before he turned away, she spoke again. Mr. Hale. He paused. I meant what I said, she told him. About paying you back. Every dollar. It is just a daper. He regarded her for a moment, then nodded once. I believe you. Oh, cannerers. He walked toward the exit, phone already in hand. Ava watched him go, unsure what the future held, but certain of one thing: whatever came next would not be simple, and it would not be quiet. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt that the truth, at least, was finally on her side. By late morning, the hospital had settled into a steady rhythm. Machines hummed softly. Carts rolled past with quiet urgency. Somewhere down the corridor, a television murmured a morning news program no one seemed to be watching. Ava sat beside her mother's bed, holding her hand, counting each rise and fall of her chest as if it were something fragile that might disappear if she stopped paying attention. Her mother had not woken yet, but her color was better, less gray, less distant. Ava leaned forward and whispered, "You scared me," then smiled faintly at the irony. Her mother had always been the strong one, the one who worked through pain, through exhaustion, through indignity. Seeing her like this felt like looking at the world upside down. A knock sounded softly at the door. Richard stood in the doorway, jacket draped neatly over his arm, his expression composed but alert. He looked different in the daylight, less imposing, more human. The faint lines around his eyes visible now. They moved her to recovery, he said quietly. That's a good sign. 82, Ava nodded. Thank you. For everything. Well, he stepped inside but stayed near the door, careful not to intrude. I spoke with the hospital's financial office, he continued. Your mother's immediate care is covered. The rest will take it one step at a time. Withers Paka. Ava tightened her grip on her mother's hand. I don't want special treatment. Was no. Richard met her gaze. You're not getting it. You're getting adequate treatment. There's a difference. In better. She studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Someone from my office will contact you later today, he added, just to document the loan properly. It's, of course, Ava said. I'll sign whatever you need. We do, he hesitated. There's something else. End quote. Her shoulders tensed. What is it? I've asked for an internal review, Richard said, regarding the laundry facility where your mother worked. Vendors. Safety. Compliance. Exposure records. Ava stared at him. Why? Because if her illness is connected to negligence, he said evenly, someone needs to be held accountable. Her throat tightened. People like us don't get accountability. 8. People like you should, he replied. The certainty in his voice unsettled her more than doubt would have. Before she could respond, her phone vibrated on the small table beside the bed. A message lit up the screen. Unknown number. She opened it and felt the blood drain from her face. You humiliated yourself and my family. Don't mistake silence for forgiveness. This isn't over. Elaine. Ava closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. Richard noticed immediately. What happened? She hesitated, then handed him the phone. He read the message once, then again. His jaw tightened. She shouldn't be contacting you, he said. Ava gave a tired smile. I'm used to worse. That doesn't make it acceptable. What? It makes it survivable, she corrected gently. Richard exhaled slowly. I'll handle it. With most hygienical dog time, Ava shook her head. Please don't make this harder. 2 eyes. He looked at her sharply. Harder for who? For you, she said. For me. For my mother. I don't want trouble. I just want her to live. With factitude, Richard considered that, then nodded once. All right. But understand something. Silence isn't neutrality. Not anymore. Yes. He glanced toward the bed. I'll come back later. You should try to rest. I diabo. I will, Ava said, though she wasn't sure how. When he left, Ava sank back into the chair, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. She thought of the night before, of Elaine's hands in her hair, of the marble floor rushing up to meet her. She touched the bandage on her shoulder unconsciously. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from a number she recognized. Ava, the nurse said softly. Your mother is waking up. Eddie. Ava was on her feet instantly. Her mother's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. Her lips parted slightly as she tried to speak. Hey, Ava whispered, leaning close. I'm here. Which commented. Her mother frowned faintly. Why? Why are you crying? Ava laughed softly through her tears. Because you're stubborn. Aided by Indira dime. Her mother smiled weakly. That's my girl. Ava pressed her forehead gently against her mother's hand. You're going to get better, she said. But you're not going back to that place. Ever. Where? Her mother's brow furrowed. The money. Don't. Ava said quickly. Just rest. Indienne, crazing body down. Later that afternoon, Ava stepped out into the hallway to breathe. The weight of the last 24 hours pressed down on her chest. But beneath it, something else stirred. Resolve. Richard was standing near the window at the end of the hall, speaking quietly into his phone. No, he said. I want full transparency. If there's liability, we face it. If there's wrongdoing, we fix it. Is signed. He ended the call and turned as Ava approached. She's awake, Ava said. His expression softened. I'm glad. Oh, she remembers nothing. Ava added. About last night. Well, that's probably for the best. 2C2. Ava hesitated. Mr. Hale. Richard. I'd problem. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Yes? Oh, I need you to understand something, she said. I didn't ask you because you're rich. I asked you because you were the last door left. Defined to be. He nodded slowly. I know. End quote. And if this causes problems for you at home, at work, it already has, he said calmly. She looked at him, startled. And I'm still here, he continued. That should tell you something. Ava studied his face, searching for signs of regret. She found none. Outside the window, the city moved on, unaware of the small shifts happening inside this narrow corridor, shifts that would ripple outward in ways neither of them could yet see. Ava squared her shoulders. Then I'll do my part. Which is, survive, she said, and pay you back, with interest, if you insist. Is not. A corner of his mouth lifted. We'll discuss terms later. Again, for the first time since she had walked into that grand living room and spoken the words that changed everything, Ava allowed herself a small, cautious hope. Not that justice would be loud, but that it might finally be real. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm linen, a strange combination that Ava was beginning to associate with relief and fear at the same time. Her mother slept again, the rise and fall of her chest slow but steady, a rhythm Ava had memorized over the past few hours. Each breath felt like a small victory. Ava sat beside the bed, her back straight despite the ache in her shoulder, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked composed now, but inside her thoughts were restless, circling the same questions over and over. What would happen next? How long could this fragile calm last? A soft knock sounded at the door. Ava turned as Richard stepped inside, this time without his coat. His tie was loosened. The crisp edge of formality softened just enough to suggest fatigue. He paused when he saw Ava's mother sleeping, then lowered his voice instinctively. I spoke with the attending physician, he said. They're optimistic, cautiously, but genuinely. Ava nodded. That's more than I was hoping for yesterday. Gay, as Nana before pated. Yesterday feels like a long time ago, he replied. It did. Less than 24 hours had passed since she had stood trembling in his living room, her dignity stripped away piece by piece. Yet the distance between that moment and this one felt enormous, as if something fundamental had shifted in the space between. Richard moved closer. Stopping at the foot of the bed, he studied Ava's mother for a moment. His expression unreadable. She worked hard, Ava said quietly, following his gaze. Always did, even when she shouldn't have. Is fearant, Richard nodded. People like that rarely think they're allowed to stop. Is the dynas in naste? Ava glanced at him. People like that? People who believe rest is something you earn after everything else is done. He clarified. And everything else is never done. Does not have I vord den. She considered his words, then gave a small, sad smile. That sounds familiar. It's sad. They stood in silence for a moment, the machines filling the gaps where conversation might have gone. There's something you should know, Richard said finally. About what happens next. Reported. Ava's stomach tightened. Okay. With free night. I won't pressure you, he continued. But I won't pretend this will be simple either. My wife is not pleased. Ava looked down at her hands. I don't want to cause problems in your marriage. It is not. Richard's jaw tightened slightly. You didn't cause them. We can. That's not how she sees it. No. He agreed. It isn't. I won. He took a breath, as if choosing his words carefully. Elaine believes control is the same as order. When something disrupts that, she reacts. Ava thought of the sudden pain, the shock of being pulled backward, the cold floor against her skin. Violently, she said before she could stop herself. Richard met her eyes. He didn't look away. Yes. Ava swallowed. Then why are you still helping me? He answered without hesitation. Because being silent would make me complicit. I bring. The words settled heavily between them. Ava turned back to her mother, watching the slow blink of the monitor. I don't want pity, she said. And I don't want protection. I just want fairness. Richard nodded. That's usually the most dangerous thing to ask for. End quote. She huffed a quiet, humorless laugh. So I've been told. There, Buvert. A nurse appeared briefly to adjust a line, murmuring reassurances before moving on. When the door closed again, Ava shifted in her chair, wincing slightly. You should sit back, Richard said. You've barely rested. End quote. I'm fine. Mister, you're injured. So is my pride, she replied softly. One of them will heal. As way. He watched her for a moment, then pulled a chair closer and sat. You don't have to carry everything alone, he said. Ava turned toward him. You know what's strange? I've heard people say that my entire life, usually right before they leave. Well, I'm not saying it lightly. I know, she said. That's what scares me. Will do. He studied her face, seeing not weakness but caution earned the hard way. Trust doesn't have to be immediate, he said. It can be gradual, conditional. She nodded slowly. Like a loan. Oper. A faint smile crossed his face. Exactly. I won. Her phone buzzed quietly in her pocket. She checked the screen and felt a familiar knot form in her chest. Another message from Elaine. You think one night makes you untouchable? It doesn't. Remember where you belong. Ava closed her eyes briefly, then slipped the phone back into her pocket without responding. Richard noticed the shift in her expression. More messages? Yes. AD. Do you want me to intervene? Ava shook her head. Not yet. It sighed. Why not? Because I don't want to be rescued, she said simply. I want this to be right. Too. He leaned back, considering her words. Sometimes doing what's right looks a lot like rescuing, he said. The difference is consent. Ez's. She looked at him then. Really looked at him. Then if I ask, she said carefully. Will you still help? Yes, he replied. If you ask. Ardor. She nodded, absorbing that. Later that afternoon, a social worker stopped by to discuss discharge planning, outlining medications, follow-up appointments, lifestyle changes. Ava listened intently, asking questions, taking notes. Richard stood nearby, silent but attentive, occasionally stepping in to clarify details or confirm arrangements. When the social worker left, Ava exhaled slowly. "It's a lot." "Oh, it is," Richard agreed. "But it's manageable." "Why?" She looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and something else, resolve. "I'll need to find different work," she said. "Something safer, something stable." "It is. I may have an idea," he replied. Ava stiffened. "I don't want charity." "Tuwei, it's not charity," he said calmly. "It's an opportunity. If you decide it makes sense. If not, you walk away." It was duddy. She considered that. "We'll talk later." "I'd easy. Free too." "That's fair." As evening approached, the light in the room softened. Ava's mother stirred again, her eyes fluttering open. "Ava?" she murmured weakly. "I'm here," Ava said instantly, leaning forward. "You're okay. You're safe." Her mother's gaze drifted, then settled briefly on Richard. Confusion crossed her face. "Who?" "A friend," Ava said after a heartbeat. "Someone who helped." Her mother nodded faintly, already slipping back into sleep. Richard stepped back, giving them privacy. Ava watched her mother's face relax, then straightened slowly. "She's going to ask questions," Ava said quietly. "So will you," Richard replied. "Yes," she agreed. "I will." They walked out into the hallway together. The hospital buzzed with the low hum of evening activity. Lives intersecting and diverging in quiet, constant motion. "I don't know what this makes us," Ava said as they stopped near the elevators. "It doesn't have to make us anything yet," Richard replied. "Sometimes it's enough to keep going." 10, she nodded. "Then that's what I'll do." Where the reason tome. As they parted ways for the night, Ava felt the weight of exhaustion settle over her, but beneath it, something steadier had taken root. She had been hurt, humiliated, dismissed, but she was still standing. And somewhere between a marble floor and a hospital bed, the truth had begun to surface. Slow and undeniable, morning light filtered through the hospital windows in thin, pale bands, illuminating dust motes that drifted lazily in the air. Ava watched them move as she sat beside her mother's bed, counting time not by hours but by breaths. Each inhale still sounded fragile to her, as if the air itself might refuse to cooperate. Her mother slept more deeply now, sedated but stable. The machines no longer felt like threats. They were companions, watchful, steady, indifferent in the way only machines could be. Ava shifted carefully in her chair, her shoulder protesting with a sharp reminder of the night before. She ignored it. Pain had a way of shrinking when compared to fear, and fear had loosened its grip just enough to let something else take its place. Resolve. The door opened softly, and a nurse stepped in with a clipboard. "Good morning, Ms. Johnson," she said. "Your mother's vitals look good. We're going to start reducing the sedation this afternoon." "Oh, go." Ava nodded. "Thank you." "I am." As the nurse left, Ava allowed herself a small breath of relief. It wasn't victory. It wasn't safety. But it was forward motion. Her phone vibrated quietly on the small table beside the bed. This time, it wasn't Elaine. It was a message from an unfamiliar number, followed almost immediately by another. "This is Martin Lewis, legal counsel for Hale Industries. Mr. Hale has asked me to coordinate with you regarding documentation for the medical loan and related matters." Ava stared at the screen for a long moment. Related matters. The phrase carried weight. It suggested this was no longer just about money or a single night of desperation. It meant systems, processes, consequences. It meant being seen. She typed back slowly. "I'm at the hospital with my mother. I can speak later today." The response came quickly. "Of course. There's no rush. Please focus on your family." Ava exhaled, surprised by the courtesy. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and turned her attention back to her mother. A few hours later, as the sun climbed higher, Richard arrived. He didn't announce himself this time. Ava sensed him before she saw him. The quiet shift in the room's energy. He stood near the door, hands in his pockets, scanning the monitors with practiced calm. "How is she?" he asked. "They're going to wake her up slowly," Ava replied. "She should be more alert by tonight." "Well, that's good," he said. He hesitated, then added, "How are you?" She gave a short laugh. "I don't know yet. I work out." He nodded. "Fair." Dudded. They stepped out into the hallway together, the door closing softly behind them. The corridor smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic, the hospital's version of normalcy. "I spoke to my attorney," Richard said as they walked. "Not to protect myself, to make sure everything we do is clean. Transparent." 18 said. Ava stopped walking and turned to face him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want you to think there are strings you can't see," he replied. "Or traps you didn't agree to, well." Her gaze searched his face. "People like me learn to look for those first. Number 10s. I know. It is, doesn't it?" They resumed walking. Slower now. "I also spoke with human resources," he continued, "about your position at the house." It was Pat de Zelfast. Ava's stomach tightened. "Am I being fired?" "No," he said immediately. "But I want to be honest. Things there won't be the same." One. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I didn't expect them to be." "It's not as though Elaine is resistant," Richard said carefully, "to any situation she doesn't control." Ava thought of the message. The threat wrapped in polite cruelty. "She doesn't see me as a situation," Ava said quietly. "She sees me as a problem." "I do's." Richard didn't deny it. "That's why I think it may be better for you not to return." "Oh, day." Ava stopped again. "I need that job. Is there work at 9? You need safety more," he replied. "And dignity." She crossed her arms, wincing slightly as her shoulder protested. "I don't want to be moved out of the way because I make someone uncomfortable." "Derry Duix. That's not what this is." "Eza, isn't it?" Richard met her gaze steadily. "This is about removing you from harm, not from sight." Two-way. They stood there for a moment, the hallway buzzing quietly around them. "I have an opening at one of our smaller offices," he said. "Administrative support, predictable hours, clean environment. It's not a favor. You're qualified." With her wasnar, Ava absorbed that slowly. "And my mother? She'll need care," he said. "Follow-ups. A stable schedule. This would allow that." "Permabit." Ava looked away, wrestling with the familiar fear that acceptance would erase her independence, that taking help would somehow make her smaller. "You don't have to decide now," Richard added. "Nothing happens without your consent." Represent. She nodded. "Thank you for saying that." "I do." They returned to the room just as Ava's mother stirred, her eyelids fluttering open with more focus this time. "Ava?" she murmured. "I'm here," Ava said instantly, moving to her side. "You're doing great." Was odd example at duty, her mother blinked, then frowned slightly as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. "What happened?" "You got sick," Ava said gently. "They fixed what they could. Now you need to rest." And her mother's gaze shifted to Richard, who stood a respectful distance away. "Who's that?" Ava hesitated, then said, "Someone who helped us." Her mother studied him for a moment, then nodded faintly. "Thank you," she said, her voice weak but sincere. "You're welcome," Richard replied quietly. As the day wore on, Ava watched her mother grow more alert, asking questions, complaining softly about the machines, about the dryness in her throat. Normal complaints, beautiful complaints. Late in the afternoon, Richard received a call. He stepped into the hallway, his expression tightening as he listened. When he returned, Ava noticed immediately. "What is it?" "My wife," he said. "She's not happy with the direction things are taking." "Oh, Bertie." Ava's shoulders tensed. "I don't want to be the reason." "You're not," he interrupted gently. "You're the reason I'm finally paying attention." "Oh," as dudded. She studied him, seeing the cost in his eyes. "This could get ugly." "Oh, it already is," he said. "The difference is that now it's honest." I pried. Ava leaned back in her chair, exhaustion settling into her bones. I didn't plan any of this, she said. I know, Richard replied. But plans aren't the same as responsibility. As evening approached, the hospital lights softened again, shifting into night mode. Ava sat quietly, holding her mother's hand, feeling the warmth. The life still there. Whatever came next, lawyers, accusations, choices could wait a few more hours. For now, her mother was alive, and Ava was no longer invisible. That night, Ava did not leave the hospital. She lay curled on the narrow visitor's couch beside her mother's bed, shoes still on, jacket pulled tight around her shoulders. The lights were dimmed, the hallway quieter now, but the building never truly slept. Somewhere nearby, a machine beeped steadily, counting out time in a language Ava was beginning to understand too well. Her mother stirred occasionally, murmuring half-formed words before drifting back into sleep. Each sound made Ava's heart jump, then settle again. She had learned this rhythm: fear, relief, repeat. At some point past midnight, Ava's phone buzzed softly in her hand. A new message. She stared at the screen for a long moment before opening it, bracing herself. This is Elaine Hale. We need to talk. Ava's chest tightened. She glanced at her mother, then carefully stood and stepped into the hallway, moving far enough away that her voice would not carry. She leaned against the cool wall, closed her eyes once, and answered. I don't think that's a good idea. The response came almost instantly. You don't get to decide that. Ava exhaled slowly, the way she had been taught. In, hold, out. I'm at the hospital with my mother, she typed. She almost added please, then deleted it. There was a pause this time, long enough to make Ava hope, briefly, that the conversation might end there. Then her phone rang. Ava hesitated, then answered. Hello. Well, do heaven 23. Elaine's voice was smooth, controlled, stripped of the earlier rage. That somehow made it worse. You've caused quite a disruption, Elaine said. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me? Ava closed her eyes. I didn't intend to. Intentions are irrelevant. Elaine cut in. What matters is perception. And the perception right now is that you manipulated my husband. I do that. I didn't, Ava said quietly. I asked him for help. That's all. With Adawise. You cornered him, Elaine snapped. Alone. Late at night. You embarrassed yourself and me. Ava felt a familiar heat rise in her chest. You dragged me by my hair, she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. I fell. I was hurt. Die. Elaine laughed softly. Don't exaggerate. Ava opened her eyes, staring down the empty hallway. I'm not. There was silence on the other end. Then a sigh. Listen carefully, Elaine said. You will take the money. You will disappear quietly. And this ends. End quote. Ava swallowed. I'm not disappearing. It's Ignover. You don't have a choice. I do, Ava replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. And I'm not asking for anything more than what was agreed. Well, for Mizet. Elaine's tone sharpened. You think Richard is choosing you? He's choosing order. Once things settle, you'll be forgotten. Maybe, Ava said. But not tonight. Was not Joe? Elaine hung up without another word. Ava lowered the phone, her hands shaking. For a moment, she felt the familiar pull to shrink, to retreat, to make herself smaller so the world would stop pushing back. Then she thought of the monitor beside her mother's bed, the steady proof of life. She straightened her shoulders and walked back into the room. Morning came slowly. Sunlight crept across the floor, touching the edge of the bed, the pale blanket, her mother's hand. Ava was awake when it happened, sitting upright, watching the machines. When her mother's eyes opened fully for the first time, Ava, she said, clearer now. Why does it hurt to breathe? Ava moved instantly to her side. Because your lungs are healing, she said gently. It's uncomfortable, but it means you're still here. Arkin, Her mother frowned. Did I scare you? Ava smiled. Tears threatening. Yes, very much. Her mother squeezed her fingers weakly. I'm sorry. With Macad other desire. Don't be. Ava whispered. Just stay. Everyone. A knock sounded at the door, followed by Dr. Lawson's familiar face. Good morning, he said. How are we feeling? Tired. Ava's mother replied. Hungry. Is not 2,000. The doctor smiled. That's an excellent sign. Joe. He explained the next steps: oxygen therapy, medication, weeks of rest, lifestyle changes that could no longer be ignored. Ava listened carefully, asking questions, committing everything to memory. When the doctor left, her mother turned her head slightly. You look hurt, she said, noticing the bandage. Ava hesitated. I fell. Her mother studied her face with the quiet perception that had always unsettled Ava. Did someone push you? Ava didn't answer right away. It doesn't matter, she said finally. Her mother sighed softly. It always matters. Oh, desires. Later that morning, Richard arrived again, carrying a paper bag and a quiet seriousness. He greeted Ava with a nod, then turned to her mother. How are you feeling? He asked. Her mother looked at him curiously. Like I lost a fight, she said. But I'm still standing. Idea. He smiled faintly. That counts. Is not common. When Ava stepped out into the hallway with him a few minutes later, he spoke first. Elaine called me last night. E1. Ava stiffened. She called me too. Everyone, I know, he said. She told me. Would it prove? Ava stopped walking. She what? She wasn't hiding it, Richard said calmly. She believes confrontation is honesty. V's gone. And what do you believe? Ava asked. Richard met her gaze. I believe intimidation is not conversation. Relief and fear tangled inside Ava's chest. This is escalating. 2. Yes, he agreed. And that's precisely why we need to be careful. Is 1. Careful usually means quiet, Ava said. And quiet usually means someone like me loses. Oh, Richard didn't argue. Not this time. Well, guys, he paused, then added, I've instructed my attorney to document everything. Messages, injuries, witness accounts. With Cap to do that. Ava stared at him. Why? Because if we proceed, he said, we do it with the truth on record. 3. She exhaled slowly. I never wanted a war. Was working too. Neither did I, he said. But ignoring injustice doesn't prevent conflict. It just delays it. Ava leaned against the wall, fatigue washing over her. I'm tired. I know, he replied. That's why you won't do this alone. Well, she looked at him, searching for certainty. And if this costs you your marriage? Richard didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. Some costs only feel unbearable because we avoided them for too long. Oh, they stood there in silence, the hospital moving around them, life continuing with or without their consent. Inside the room, Ava's mother slept peacefully again, unaware of the lines being drawn beyond her door. Ava looked back at her, then at Richard. Whatever happens, she said, I'm not backing down. It is Deverett, he nodded. Neither am I. Doesn't. For the first time since she had spoken the words that changed everything, Ava understood that survival was no longer her only goal. Now, she wanted justice too. The tension followed Ava out of the hospital like a second shadow. By mid-morning, her mother had been transferred to a quieter recovery wing, stable enough to rest without constant interruption. Ava stood at the bedside a long time before leaving, memorizing the shape of her mother's face as she slept, the slight furrow between her brows that had been there for as long as Ava could remember. I'll be back this afternoon, Ava whispered. I promise. A-team. Her mother didn't wake, but Ava imagined she heard her anyway. She always did. Outside, the air was crisp and bright, the city moving with its usual indifference. Richard's car waited at the curb. Ava hesitated before getting in. the instinct to refuse help tugging at her again. "You don't have to," she began. "I know," Richard said, holding the door open. "But today, let me—" She slid into the passenger seat, careful of her shoulder. As the car pulled away, the hospital disappeared behind them, but the weight of it stayed with her. They drove in silence for several minutes. "I reviewed the preliminary findings this morning," Richard said eventually. "About the laundry facility." "It is well." Ava turned toward him. "Already?" "I asked for urgency," he replied. "They didn't disappoint." Her chest tightened. "And there were violations," he said evenly. "Long-term exposure risks that were documented but never corrected. Your mother wasn't the only one affected." To give the detective ire, Ava looked down at her hands. They knew. With Riplan. "Yes. ID. And they did nothing." Yes. End quote. The word landed heavily. Ava closed her eyes briefly. She kept saying she couldn't quit. That if she did, someone else would just take her place. Rated R. That's usually how systems survive, Richard said. By convincing people they're replaceable. Injure. The car stopped at a red light. Ava watched a woman cross the street pushing a stroller. Her face tired but determined. Ordinary life. Moving on. "What happens now?" Ava asked. Richard glanced at her. "That depends on you." "Everyone." She frowned. "On me? This could become formal," he said. "Investigations, claims, accountability. Or it could stay quiet. Medical assistance. Job transition. No public attention." With these, Ava understood immediately. Silence for safety. Noise for justice. "And what do you want?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "I want the truth acknowledged," he said finally. "But it's not my body that paid the price." Was lived. Ava swallowed. "If this becomes public, my mother will be protected," he said. "I won't allow retaliation." 18. "You can't guarantee that," Ava replied. "Not for people like us." "Dake Spires of the Monet?" Richard nodded. "No, I can't. That's why this has to be your choice." Intended. They arrived at her apartment building shortly after. Ava paused with her hand on the door handle. "I need to change," she said. "And think. I'll be at the office," Richard replied. "Call me when you're ready." "Come." She nodded and stepped out of the car. Inside the apartment, the quiet felt heavy. Ava changed her clothes slowly, wincing as she moved her shoulder. She stood in front of the small bathroom mirror and studied her reflection. The bruise was still visible beneath the bandage. Her eyes looked older than they had a week ago. Her phone buzzed on the counter. "Elaine again. I hear you're planning something foolish." Ava stared at the message, her jaw tightening. "This doesn't concern you." Ava typed back before she could stop herself. The response was immediate. "Everything that concerns Richard concerns me." Ava's fingers hovered over the screen. Then she typed, deliberately, "Then you should be concerned with the truth." There was a long pause. Longer than usual. When the reply came, it was shorter. "You won't win this." Ava set the phone down, her hands shaking not with fear this time, but anger. She sat at the small kitchen table and opened her laptop, pulling up old emails, saved pay stubs, documents her mother had kept just in case. She didn't know what she was looking for at first, only that she needed to understand the shape of what had hurt them. Hours passed. By the time she returned to the hospital that afternoon, Ava felt different. Tired. Yes, but steadier. Her mother was awake, sipping water. Her voice stronger now. "You look serious," her mother said. "I am," Ava replied, taking her hand. "We need to talk. It's, about the job, about the chemicals, about the years her mother had worked through coughing fits and exhaustion because there was no other option." Her mother listened quietly, eyes closing at times, then opening again. "They'll make trouble for you," her mother said softly when Ava finished. "They already have," Ava replied. "This just gives it a name." Her mother sighed. "I didn't raise you to be quiet." "Whoa," Ava smiled faintly. I know. Everyone. Richard arrived later that evening. Ava met him in the hallway. I've made a decision, she said. He studied her face. And? I want it documented. Ava said. All of it. What happened to my mother? What happened to me? The messages. The injury. I tend. Richard nodded slowly. That will escalate things. Oh, I know, Ava replied. But silence already cost us years. And, he held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Then we proceed carefully. And thoroughly. Yes, Elaine won't stop, Ava said. No, Richard agreed. She won't. I can see will.com. And if this destroys your marriage? He exhaled. Then it tells me something was already broken. Du prize. Ava absorbed that. Then nodded. All right. Matigno. They walked back into the room together. Ava's mother looked at them, understanding more than either of them said. Outside, night fell over the city, quiet and indifferent. But inside Ava, something had hardened into clarity. She had spent her life surviving systems designed to overlook her. Now, she intended to make one of them answer. The first formal meeting took place 2 days later. Ava sat at the long conference table on the 32nd floor of Hale Industries, her hands folded neatly in front of her, her posture straight despite the tension pulling at her shoulders. The room was all glass and steel, designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure. She had cleaned rooms larger than this, rooms that belonged to people who never once wondered how they had earned so much space. Richard sat at the head of the table. To his right was Martin Lewis, his attorney, gray-haired and precise, already arranging documents into neat stacks. Across from Ava sat 2 representatives from compliance and risk management, their expressions polite, distant, professional. Ava had never been in a room like this as anything other than staff. Now she was the reason it existed. Before we begin, Martin said, adjusting his glasses, I want to be clear. Ms. Johnson is here voluntarily. She is not an employee under review. She is a witness. To weaken to ire. One of the compliance officers nodded. Understood. I am narrated. Ava felt her throat tighten at the word witness. It made everything feel real in a way nothing else had yet. Richard glanced at her. You don't have to do this today if you're not ready. Good night. Ava met his eyes. I'm ready. It's CeeLo. Martin slid a folder toward her. We'll start with the events of last week. Take your time. Well, Ava opened the folder and stared down at the blank legal pad inside. For a moment, the room faded. She saw instead the marble floor. The sudden pain, the shock of being pulled backward. Her voice came out steady anyway. I asked Mr. Hale for a loan. She began. Not a gift. A loan. To cover an emergency medical deposit for my mother. Action. She described the hospital, the timeline, the urgency. She described Elaine's entrance into the room, the accusations, the humiliation. When she reached the moment where Elaine had grabbed her hair, Ava paused, her fingers tightening around the pen. It's all right, Martin said quietly. You can stop if you need to. Well, Ava shook her head. No, I won't. She finished the account without embellishment. Just facts. Just truth. When she was done, the room was silent. One of the compliance officers cleared his throat. Ms. Fallon. Johnson. Were there any witnesses to the physical altercation? No, Ava replied. But I was treated for my injury at St. Mary's Hospital. A dozen trans. Martin nodded. We've already requested the medical report. The officer made a note. Thank you. It's Dabesust. Richard had not spoken once. When the meeting ended, Ava felt hollowed out, as if she had poured something essential onto the table and left it there. She stood slowly, her knees unsteady. You did well, Martin said. Ava gave a small nod. It didn't feel like doing well. There, it rarely does, he replied. Outside the conference room, Richard walked beside her in silence until they reached the elevator. You didn't have to stay for all of that, Ava said quietly. It was my statement. Well, I know, he replied. I stayed anyway. It is not, The elevator doors closed, and the city slid into view behind the glass. Elaine was waiting in the lobby. She stood near the reception desk, perfectly composed, her posture elegant, her expression calm in a way that felt rehearsed. Ava felt the tension coil instantly in her chest. Richard stopped short. "Elaine, we have to dode." Her eyes flicked to Ava, then back to him. "So this is happening," she said coolly. "Yes," Richard replied. "It is." "Resent." Elaine smiled faintly. "You're humiliating yourself," Red matted. "No," he said. "I'm correcting myself." With Bedignauthers, she turned to Ava then, her gaze sharp. "Enjoy this moment," she said. "It won't last." We dudded. Ava felt her pulse quicken, but she did not look away. "I'm not enjoying it," she said. "I'm enduring it." Elaine laughed softly. "You think that makes you brave? I think it makes me honest." Elaine's smile faltered. Just for a fraction of a second, Richard stepped between them. "That's enough." Undone press. Elaine's eyes hardened. "You're choosing her." I'm choosing the truth," he replied. She looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "Then don't be surprised when the cost comes due." 18 minutes in Frested, she turned and walked away, heels clicking sharply against the marble. Ava exhaled slowly, only then realizing she had been holding her breath. "I'm sorry," she said. "She shouldn't have confronted you like that." "Mark," Richard shook his head. "This isn't on you." They exited the building together. Outside, the city was loud, indifferent, alive. Richard's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's my board chair." "Enter." Ava stiffened. "You don't have to answer." "I'm 7 Parrot." "I do," he said. He stepped a few feet away, speaking in low tones. Ava watched his expression tighten, then smooth itself back into calm. When he returned, his jaw was set. "They're concerned," he said. "About exposure, about precedent." And you?" Ava asked. "I'm concerned about doing what's right," he replied. "Those concerns don't always align." I wonder. They drove back to the hospital in silence. Ava's thoughts churned. She had known this would ripple outward. She just hadn't known how fast. Her mother was awake when they arrived, her color improving, her voice stronger. "You look tired," her mother said as Ava sat beside her. "I am," Ava admitted. Her mother squeezed her hand gently. "Whatever you're doing," she said, "do it all the way." "Over." Ava smiled faintly. "I plan to go." "Oh." Later that evening, as Ava stood at the window of the recovery room, watching the city lights flicker on, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. "We know what you're trying to do. Be careful." Ava stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Richard noticed her expression. "What is it?" She handed him the phone without a word. He read the message once, then looked at her, his expression darkening. This just crossed another line. Then with most advisory, Ava swallowed. "I didn't think it would be this fast." Neither did I," Richard replied. "But now we know what we're dealing with." She looked back at the window, at the city that had never made room for her before. "I won't stop," she said quietly. Richard nodded. "Then neither will I." End quote. Somewhere far below, traffic moved steadily, unaware that a quiet confrontation had begun, one that would not be settled in boardrooms alone, but in truth, persistence, and the cost of refusing to look away. The first real consequence arrived the following morning. Ava was sitting beside her mother's bed, carefully helping her sip broth. When Richard's phone rang, he glanced at the screen, his expression tightening in a way Ava had learned to recognize. "I need to take this," he said quietly. Ava nodded. "I'll be here." He stepped into the hallway, his voice low but firm as the door closed behind him. Ava focused on her mother, who grimaced slightly as she swallowed. "Tastes like cardboard," her mother muttered. Ava smiled faintly. "You always said hospital food builds character." "We have dire," her mother huffed. Then I must be very strong by now. Abertoon. Ava laughed softly, then noticed her mother watching her more closely than before. What's wrong? Her mother asked. Ava shook her head. Nothing. That's a lie, her mother said gently. You never were good at hiding things from me. Oh, Ava hesitated, then sighed. Things are complicated. Everyone. Her mother's gaze drifted toward the door. That man, she said slowly, he's kind to you. He's trying to do the right thing, Ava replied. Her mother nodded. Those are not always the same. Before Ava could answer, the door opened again. Richard stepped back inside, his face composed but strained. That was the board, he said quietly. Ava felt her chest tighten. And they want this contained, he replied. No further documentation. No escalation. Quiet resolutions. Ava's jaw clenched. And you said? I said no. Everyone. The word landed with weight. Her mother looked between them, understanding more than Ava wished she did. Am I the reason you're fighting? She asked softly. No, Ava said immediately. You're the reason I'm not backing down. Her mother studied her face, then reached out and squeezed her hand with surprising strength. Then don't. Duhaded. Richard watched the exchange, something unreadable passing through his eyes. They're scheduling an emergency session this afternoon, he continued. They'll try to overrule me. That cries. Can they? Ava asked. Yes, he said honestly, but not without leaving a trail. Ava exhaled slowly. That's what they're afraid of. For example. Yes. Iddies. Her phone buzzed again. Ava glanced at the screen and felt a chill run through her. It was another unknown number. Stop before you regret it. She didn't show it to her mother this time. She handed it to Richard instead. His jaw tightened as he read it. This is intimidation. Doctus. Ava nodded. I know. I did. We'll log it, he said. Every message. Day. Her mother watched them, her expression grave. People don't threaten you unless they think they're losing, she said. Richard looked at her with new respect. That's usually true. Later that afternoon, Ava left the hospital for the first time in days. Richard insisted she go home, shower, eat something real. I'll be back before evening, Ava promised her mother. You better, her mother said. I'm not done nagging you yet. Ari. Outside. The city felt louder than Ava remembered. Too bright, too fast. She walked slowly, her shoulders still aching, her thoughts heavy. When she reached her apartment, she found a man waiting near the entrance. He looked ordinary, mid-40s, neutral expression, too neutral. Ms. Johnson? He asked. Ava stopped short. Who's asking? I represent interests concerned about your recent activities, he said smoothly. Her pulse spiked. I have nothing to say to you. Jesus. He smiled thinly. You might want to listen anyway. This path you're on, it can get uncomfortable. Ava felt fear surge, then settle into something colder. You should leave. Or think carefully, he continued. People in your position don't usually win these fights. At it. Ava met his gaze steadily. People in my position don't usually get to tell the truth either. That doesn't mean they shouldn't. And his smile faded. You're making a mistake. Then it's mine to make. She walked past him, heart pounding, and did not look back. Inside her apartment, Ava locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Her hands shook, but she forced herself to stand upright. She called Richard immediately. They approached me, she said as soon as he answered. At my building, Ardudu. There was a brief, dangerous silence on the other end of the line. Are you safe? Yes. But they're not being subtle anymore. No. He agreed. They're escalating. Was not together. So are we, Ava said quietly. She showered, letting hot water pound against her tense muscles, washing away hospital smells and fear alike. As she dressed, She noticed the bruise on her shoulder had darkened, spreading like ink beneath her skin. Proof. When she returned to the hospital that evening, Richard was already there, speaking with Martin in the hallway. They stopped when they saw her. They approached her. Richard said to Martin, "In person." "Ours." Martin's expression hardened. "That changes things." "Whenever one." "How?" Ava asked. "It strengthens your position," Martin replied, "and weakens theirs." Ava nodded slowly. Inside the room, her mother looked up as she entered. "You're late. Thanks for watching and iTunes. Traffic," Ava said, smiling. Her mother studied her face. "You're scared. Is not example, eh?" "Yes," Ava admitted. "But I'm not stopping." "We cavid." Her mother nodded approvingly. "Good. Fear keeps you careful. Courage keeps you moving." Decidem. Richard stood near the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "The board meets tomorrow," he said. "They'll try to force a resolution." "Okay. And you?" Ava asked. "I'll force a choice," he replied. She joined him at the window. "This could cost you everything." "Is the con?" He met her gaze. "Some things are more expensive than money." "Is no eyes to us." They stood there in silence, the city glowing below them, unaware of the lines being drawn above. Ava felt the weight of it all settle fully for the first time, the threats, the pressure, the imbalance of power, and yet, beneath it, something else remained. Clarity. She had spoken the truth. She had refused to disappear. Whatever happened next, she would not be alone and she would not be silent. The board meeting began at 9 o'clock sharp. Ava was not in the room, but she felt its presence like a pressure system moving through the city. She sat in the hospital cafeteria with a cup of untouched coffee, her phone face down on the table, every muscle in her body taut with anticipation. Richard had insisted she stay with her mother. "This part is mine," he had said calmly. "You've done enough. It's ace to stand of everyone." She hadn't argued, not because she agreed, but because she understood the strategy. Visibility mattered, and today, too much visibility could become a weapon. Her mother dozed lightly in her room upstairs, oxygen hissing softly, the steady rhythm of recovery continuing one breath at a time. Ava had pulled the chair close to the bed earlier, holding her mother's hand until she fell asleep again, then slipped away quietly. Now she waited. At exactly 9:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. "Richard." It started. She exhaled slowly and typed back, "Ava, I'm here." Minutes dragged by. Conversations murmured around her, nurses laughing softly, a doctor reviewing notes, someone arguing quietly about parking validation. Ordinary concerns. Ava felt oddly detached from them, as if she were standing behind glass. Her phone buzzed again. "Richard. They're pushing for containment." Severance language. Non-disclosure. Ava's jaw tightened. "Ava. About me?" "Richard. About everything." She stared at the words, anger flaring hot and immediate. Even now, they wanted silence. Clean lines. No mess. "Ava. And you?" There was a longer pause this time. She thought of Elaine, of the man outside her apartment, of the message that had arrived too quickly to be coincidence. She thought of her mother, lying upstairs because someone had decided it was cheaper to ignore warnings than to fix a system. Finally, the phone vibrated again. "Richard. I put the documentation on record." Ava closed her eyes. "Ava, all of it?" "Richard. All of it." She imagined the room, men and women in tailored suits, accustomed to controlling outcomes, suddenly confronted with facts they could not unsee. Elaine's fury, the board chair's careful language, lawyers calculating risk. Ava's phone buzzed again. Almost immediately. "Richard, they're not happy." Ava let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Ava, I didn't expect them to be way." She stood and walked toward the window. The city spread out below her in orderly chaos. Somewhere in that skyline were offices where decisions had been made without ever considering her mother's lungs, her future, her worth. Her phone buzzed again. "Richard. They've called a recess." Ava's heart pounded. Recess meant negotiation, pressure, deals behind closed doors. Ava, are they trying to remove you? Richard. They're trying. She pressed her palm flat against the glass, grounding herself. Ava, and Elaine? Another pause. Richard, she's here. Ava swallowed. That didn't surprise her. Elaine never stayed away from battles she believed she could win. Ava, be careful. Richard. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Ava forced herself to return upstairs. Sitting alone with her thoughts was making everything louder. When she reached her mother's room, she found her awake, eyes open, watching the television without really seeing it. You look like you're waiting for bad news, her mother said quietly. Ava managed a small smile. I'm waiting for honest news. It's seen. Her mother studied her for a moment. That's usually harder to hear. I grand. Ava sat and took her hand. How are you feeling? Tired, her mother replied. But alive, which I hear is an improvement. Oh, Ava laughed softly. A significant one. I have their weld. They sat together in silence for a few minutes. Then Ava's phone buzzed again. Richard. It's done. Ava's breath caught. Ava. What does that mean? Richard. I'm stepping down as CEO effective immediately. The words blurred for a moment. Ava. They forced you out. Richard. They gave me a choice. Silence or accountability. I chose accountability. Ava closed her eyes. A rush of conflicting emotions flooding her chest. Guilt rose first. Sharp and immediate. Ava, I never wanted this. Richard, I know. Ava, this is because of me. Richard, this is because of who I was pretending not to be. She felt tears sting her eyes. Ava. What happens now? Richard, an independent investigation proceeds. Public. Documented. I remain as a cooperating party. Elaine is not pleased. Ava let out a shaky breath. She's going to blame me. Was not a do. Richard. She already does. Ava looked at her mother, who was watching her closely. I'm so sorry, Ava whispered. Unsure who she was apologizing to, her mother squeezed her hand. Don't you dare be, she said softly. If a man loses his job for telling the truth, that job wasn't worth keeping. And everyone. Ava smiled through tears. Her phone buzzed again. Richard. I'm coming to the hospital. Ava, you don't have to. Richard. I know. An hour later, Richard walked into the recovery room, looking different, lighter. Somehow. Not relieved, resolute. Her mother looked up at him. You look like someone who finally stopped lying to himself, she said without preamble. Richard blinked, then smiled faintly. I suppose I do. He turned to Ava. The board released a statement. There will be press. Azos. Ava stiffened. My name is protected, he said. As much as it can be. But this will get attention. Ava nodded slowly. I expected that. Is not activins of Khan. Richard hesitated. There's something else. I was not. Her stomach tightened. What? Elaine is filing for separation, he said quietly. And she's contesting everything. Dyer. Ava felt a familiar knot of guilt tighten in her chest. I'm sorry. He shook his head. Don't be. Some endings are overdue. Dinah. They stood in silence for a moment. The weight of the consequences settling fully into the room. I don't know what happens to me now, Richard said finally. Professionally. Tenor plan. Ava met his gaze. I don't know what happens to me either. He nodded. But we'll find out. ID4. Her mother cleared her throat. If you're both done dismantling your lives, she said dryly. Could someone help me adjust this pillow? Ava laughed, moving instantly to her side. Richard stepped back, giving them space, watching with quiet respect. Later, as evening fell, Ava walked Richard to the elevator. You didn't have to do this, she said again. Lose everything. 12. I didn't lose everything, he replied. I lost a position. There's a difference. With that adjuster, she studied his face. And if this ruins you? He looked at her steadily. Then it will have been honest. It's Adri. The elevator doors opened. Ava hesitated, then spoke. Whatever happens next, thank you. For not walking away. 2. Richard nodded. Thank you for not staying silent. The doors closed. Ava stood alone in the hallway for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the hospital around her. Upstairs, her mother slept. Outside, the city buzzed with rumors and headlines yet to come, and somewhere between fear and consequence, Ava felt something settle firmly into place. This was no longer just about survival. This was about truth. The press arrived faster than Ava expected. By the next morning, St. Mary's Hospital was no longer just a place of recovery. It was a point on a map. Vans lined the street outside. Logos splashed across their sides in bright colors that felt jarring against the quiet seriousness of the building. Reporters clustered near the entrance. Voices raised. Cameras ready. All of them hungry for something to hold. Ava watched from the window of her mother's room, her stomach tightening. They're not here for me, she said quietly. Her mother, propped up slightly against her pillows, followed her gaze. They never are, she replied. They're here for the story they can tell. Adi said. Ava turned back to her. I won't let them near you. Her mother smiled faintly. I've survived worse than a few questions. 2. That's not the point. And her mother studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. You protect me. I'll let you. Mile. A knock sounded at the door. Richard stepped inside, his expression composed but alert. He had exchanged his suit for a simple jacket and open collar, as if deliberately shedding the armor he used to wear. They're asking for statements, he said. My legal team is handling most of it. No one comes up here without clearance. Rested. Ava nodded. Thank you. Thanks for watching. He glanced at her mother. How are you feeling today? Annoyed, she said frankly, which I take as a good sign. He smiled. It usually is. As the morning wore on, updates trickled in. Headlines began appearing online. Messages forwarded by friends and strangers alike. Ava avoided reading most of them, but some phrases slipped through anyway. Whistleblower, negligence, toxic exposure, CEO steps down amid internal investigation. None of them mentioned her name. Not yet. Richard returned after a brief meeting with his attorney, his jaw tight. Elaine gave an interview, and Ava felt a familiar knot form in her chest. Of course she did. Over. She denies everything, he said. Claims she acted out of concern. Says you manipulated the situation. Ava looked away, anger flaring. That was always going to happen. With Cliams. Yes, he agreed. But there's something else. He hesitated. What? Ava asked. She implied that you were involved with me, he said carefully. That your motives weren't purely financial. Ava felt heat rush to her face. That's disgusting. He said. I know. Yes, her mother snorted softly from the bed. That woman has never forgiven the world for existing, she said. Ava managed a small smile, then sobered. What does this mean? It means the narrative is shifting, Richard replied. They'll try to discredit you if they can't silence you. Love downs to Maid. Ava crossed her arms, wincing slightly as her shoulder protested. Then we don't let them. Oh, Richard nodded. Exactly. Well, later that afternoon, Martin arrived with a stack of documents and a calm expression that suggested preparation rather than alarm. The investigation is officially underway, he said. Federal and state subpoenas are being issued. And Ava's stomach flipped. That's big. Got it. It is. Martin agreed. And it's not reversible. Oh. Her mother looked at Ava. You did this. Everyone. Ava swallowed. I didn't mean to start a war. And dilate. Her mother squeezed her hand. No. You told the truth. Wars come when people don't like hearing it. The Zapter. That evening, as the light outside softened and the reporters thinned out, Ava finally stepped outside the room for a moment of air. The hallway felt quieter now, almost almost reverent. She leaned against the wall, eyes closed, letting exhaustion wash over her. Ms. Johnson, she opened her eyes to find a woman standing a few feet away. Her posture professional but gentle. Yes, I'm Claire Evans, the woman said. Patient advocacy. I wanted to speak with you. If you have a moment. It sighed. Ava hesitated, then nodded. They walked to a small seating area near the elevators. Claire folded her hands neatly in her lap. I've been reviewing your mother's case, she said, and several others with similar backgrounds. End quote. Ava's heart pounded. Others? Yes, Claire said. Laundry workers, industrial cleaners, long-term exposure. Many of them didn't have the resources to ask questions. It's say, Ava swallowed. What happens to them? That depends, Claire replied, on whether people like you are willing to be seen. We've not. Ava looked away. I never wanted to be a symbol. Arrow. I know, Claire said softly. But sometimes symbols are just people who refuse to disappear. When Ava returned to the room, Richard was standing near the window again, phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call as she entered. Everything all right? She asked. Yes, he said. And no. She waited. I've been asked to testify, he continued. Publicly. Under oath. We having some plies in 17 Ava felt her chest tighten. That's risky. Yes, he said. But it's necessary. There was Node. She nodded slowly. Elaine won't take that well. No, he agreed. She's already threatening countersuits. And, Ava sighed. She's relentless. Ifrous. So are you, he said. She looked at him, surprised. You could have walked away, he continued. Taken the money, protected your mother quietly. No one would have blamed you. Dan, Ava shook her head. I would have. We constate, her mother smiled faintly. She's stubborn, she said. Gets it from me. Way. Richard returned the smile, then sobered. There's something else you should know. With you cast. Ava braced herself. What now? The board released another statement, he said. They're cooperating fully. They've also placed several executives on leave. Ava exhaled slowly. So it's real? Yes, he replied. It's real. Quote, as night fell, Ava sat beside her mother again, holding her hand, listening to the steady rhythm of machines that no longer felt like threats. I don't know what happens after this, Ava said quietly. Her mother squeezed her fingers. Neither do I. But I know who you are. He was. Ava smiled faintly. Who's that? Someone who didn't look away. I was nope. Ava felt tears sting her eyes. Outside, the city continued its restless movement. Inside, lines had been crossed that could not be uncrossed. Ava knew the next days would be harder, louder, more dangerous. But she also knew something else now. The truth had momentum, and it was no longer hers alone. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and recycled air. Ava noticed it the moment she stepped inside. The way the scent clung to everything, as if truth itself had weight here and needed something solid to rest on. She adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder, careful not to brush against the bruise that still bloomed dark beneath her sleeve. It had faded to yellow at the edges, but it remained an uninvited witness that refused to disappear. Richard sat several rows ahead, straight-backed, hands folded, his gaze fixed forward. He had not looked back since entering. Ava understood why. Turning around would feel like doubt, and doubt had no place here today. Her mother sat beside her, bundled in a light cardigan, oxygen tubing discreet beneath her collar. She looked smaller outside the hospital bed, but her eyes were sharp, alert. You don't have to stay the whole time, Ava whispered. Her mother shook her head. I worked 32 years breathing poison, she said quietly. I can sit a few hours breathing truth. Ava swallowed hard. The judge entered. Everyone rose. When the proceedings began, the language shifted immediately formal, precise, stripped of emotion. Dates were entered into record, documents referenced, Terms like exposure limits, vendor negligence, failure to disclose repeated until they sounded almost harmless. They weren't. Ava listened as former executives were named, as memos were read aloud, warnings written years ago, filed away, ignored. She recognized the pattern instantly. It was the same pattern that had followed her mother home every night in the form of coughing fits and exhaustion. Then Richard stood. He walked to the witness stand without hesitation, raising his right hand, swearing to tell the truth. Ava felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment the headlines would be written about. The fall, the confession, the spectacle. But what followed was quieter than that. I was aware of the reports, Richard said evenly when questioned. I did not act on them with the urgency they deserved. A murmur rippled through the room. Why not? The attorney pressed. Richard paused, just long enough for the silence to stretch, because acknowledging them would have required confronting the human cost of our profit model, and I chose distance instead. Ava felt her chest tighten. That was a failure, Richard continued. Not of policy, of leadership. The words landed heavy, deliberate, not defensive, not deflecting, honest. When Ava was called next, her legs felt unsteady as she stood. Her mother squeezed her hand once before letting go. Ava walked to the stand, aware of every eye on her, every camera lens waiting. She told herself to breathe. In, hold, out. Please state your name, the clerk said. Ava Johnson, Rebez. And your relationship to the case? Ava glanced briefly at Richard, then back to the room. My mother is one of the workers affected. I was injured during an incident connected to this matter. To Ged. The questions came steadily. About the loan, about the hospital, about the confrontation. When asked to describe what happened in the Hale residence, Ava felt a familiar heat rise in her chest. She forced herself to keep her voice level. I was asking for time, she said, for my mother to live. We just threw them. There was no drama in her words, no accusation, just truth. Across the room, Elaine sat rigid, her expression carefully neutral. Ava did not look at her again. When the testimony ended, Ava returned to her seat, her hands trembling now that the moment had passed. Her mother leaned close. You did good? She whispered. Ava exhaled slowly. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Questions flew before Ava could reach the steps. Ms. Johnson, do you feel justice is being served? Do you blame Hale Industries for your mother's condition? Do you think this will change corporate accountability? Ava stopped. The sudden stillness caught them off guard. I don't know what justice looks like yet, she said clearly. But I know what silence costs, and I'm done paying it. Eyes. She turned and walked away before anyone could ask another question. That evening, Ava sat with her mother in the small apartment. The television muted, the city humming beyond the windows. Richard had gone to meet with his legal team. The world kept moving, rearranging itself around decisions already made. You could have taken the money and disappeared, her mother said quietly. Ava nodded. I know. Thanks for watching, but you didn't. Equals. No. Her mother studied her face. Why? Ava thought of the courtroom, of the memos, of the years lost to quiet suffering. Because if I disappeared, she said softly, nothing would change, and I couldn't live with that. Thank you for watching. Her mother reached for her hand. Neither could I. A knock sounded at the door later that night. Richard stood outside, his face drawn but calm. He looked tired in a way Ava recognized, not exhaustion, but release. It's done, he said quietly as he stepped inside. Ava's heart skipped. What is? The loan, he said. I had the documents revised. Well, she frowned. Revised how? Richard met her gaze. The debt is officially recorded. Fixed terms. No interest. No leverage. You owe exactly what you borrowed. Nothing more. That is bill important. Ava stared at him. Why tell me that now? Because dignity matters, he replied. Even in help. To brutality, she swallowed. Thank you. To free what? He nodded once. You'll pay it back when you can. However long it takes. When we haven't boated. Ava looked down at the papers in his hand. Then back at him. I will. And if you haven't, I know. Reezy one. They stood there in quiet understanding. No celebration. No relief. Just the steady knowledge that something had been set right. Even if everything wasn't fixed. Later. As Ava lay awake on the couch. She replayed the day in her mind. The courtroom. The questions. The moment she chose not to disappear. Justice hadn't arrived with fanfare. It had arrived with documentation, testimony, and the refusal to look away. And tomorrow, the work would continue. The first night after the hearing was the quietest Ava could remember. Not peaceful quiet in the way a city feels just before a storm breaks. She lay awake on the couch in her apartment, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow, uneven circles. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of traffic outside, the click of the radiator, the distant siren that faded before it reached her block. Her mother slept in the bedroom, breathing softly, a sound Ava had learned not to take for granted. Ava closed her eyes and let the events of the day replay themselves without resistance. The courtroom, the questions, the way her voice had stayed steady even when her hands shook. She had expected to feel victorious. Instead, she felt exposed. Truth did that. It stripped you bare and then asked you to stand anyway. Her phone buzzed softly on the coffee table. A message from Richard. They're already pushing back. Publicly cooperative. Privately resistant. Ava exhaled and typed back. I expected that. A pause. Richard. So did I. Are you all right? Ava glanced toward the bedroom door. Ava. My mother's asleep. That's enough for tonight. Richard. It is. She set the phone aside and finally allowed her body to rest. Even if her mind refused to follow. The next morning brought movement. By noon, Ava's inbox was full of messages she hadn't asked for advocacy groups. Journalists. Former workers who recognized pieces of their own stories in hers. Some were polite. Some were desperate. Some simply said thank you. One message stopped her cold. My sister worked there too. She didn't make it. Thank you for saying what we couldn't. Ava stared at the words for a long time. Then she closed the laptop gently, as if the weight of that sentence might spill out if she didn't. Her mother watched her from the table. You look like you just aged 10 years. When B1, Ava gave a tired smile. Only 10? Her mother reached for her hand. You opened a door. Now people are walking through it. I can't. That's what scares me. Okay. Her mother nodded. Good. Means you understand what it's worth. If these night, that afternoon, Richard arrived with Martin. They sat at the small kitchen table, its surface crowded with legal folders and mugs of coffee that went cold untouched. The investigation has expanded, Martin said. More facilities, more records, more witnesses. Workda, Ava nodded. I'm not surprised. Isnar, there's also something else. He added. Retaliation is being discussed. I work, Ava stiffened. Against me? Indirectly, Martin said carefully. Smear campaigns. Character framing. It's subtle so far. We can. Richard leaned forward. Elaine is behind most of it. Reason to. Ava felt a familiar anger rise, then settle into something steadier. She's trying to turn this into a morality play. And bread. Yes, Richard said, with you as the distraction. Ice. Ava looked down at her hands. I didn't ask for this role. No, Martin agreed. But you're in it now. 8. Silence settled over the table. What do you need from me? Ava asked finally. Richard met her gaze. Consistency. And boundaries. Heaven. Ava frowned. Meaning. Don't over-explain, he said. Don't perform. You don't owe anyone access to your pain. He's 9. She considered that. People won't like it. Is departed. They don't have to be. Richard replied. They have to hear the truth. Later that evening, Ava walked alone for the first time in days. Just a few blocks. Just enough to feel the city around her again. The neighborhood looked the same storefronts. Streetlights. The corner where the bus always ran late. Yet something had shifted. People looked at her now. Not everyone. Not obviously. But she felt it in the way conversations paused. In the way a woman at the grocery store studied her face a second too long before offering a quiet nod of recognition. Ava didn't know how she felt about that yet. On her way home, she noticed a folded piece of paper tucked under her apartment door. No envelope. No name. Be careful who you trust. Her pulse quickened. But she forced herself to breathe. In. Hold. Out. She picked it up. Unfolded it once. Then again. No signature. No explanation. Just the threat implied by its presence. Inside. She locked the door and set the paper on the table. Her mother noticed immediately. What's that? Ava hesitated. Then handed it to her. Her mother read it. Then scoffed softly. That's all they've got? Ava looked at her. You're not scared? I'm old, her mother said. And I've already been sick. Fear has diminishing returns. Ava laughed despite herself. That night, as Ava lay in bed, her phone buzzed again. Richard, we need to talk tomorrow. In person. Ava, is something wrong? Richard, something important. She stared at the screen. A knot forming in her chest. Ava, I'll be there. The next morning, they met in a quiet cafe away from cameras and curious eyes. Richard arrived early. Already seated. Hands wrapped around a coffee he hadn't touched. You look serious, Ava said as she sat down. I am, he replied. She waited. I've been asked to lead an independent oversight foundation, Richard said. Corporate accountability. Worker safety. Transparent audits. It is not. Ava blinked. That was fast. Or two. It wasn't spontaneous, he said. The board knew this was coming. They just hoped I wouldn't accept. And will you? Yes. And the Creaser. Ava studied him. Why tell me this? Because they want your involvement, he said carefully. Her stomach tightened. In what way? Advisory, he said. Optional. Limited. On your terms. Eeple. Ava leaned back slowly. You said no strings. It's come. There aren't, he said. You can walk away. But I wanted you to hear it from me. Not the press. I peer. Ava stared out the window at the passing traffic. She had spent her life cleaning up after systems that never noticed her. Now one of them was asking her to help redesign it. I don't know if I'm ready, she said honestly. That's all right, Richard replied. Readiness isn't a requirement. Integrity is. She looked back at him. And what if I say no? Then I'll respect it, he said. Completely. Ava nodded slowly. Let me think. Teenzo. Of course. And, when she returned home, her mother was sitting by the window, sunlight warming her face. They want something, her mother said without turning. Ava smiled faintly. How did you know? You came back with that look, her mother replied. The one that says the world is knocking again. And Ava sat beside her. They want me to help change things. Oh, her mother nodded. And do you want to? Ava thought of the note under the door. The messages. The faces of people she'd never met who were finally being heard. I want to make sure this means something, Ava said softly. Her mother reached for her hand. Then make it mean something. T5 sighed. That night, Ava stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. The storm she'd sensed before hadn't broken yet, but she knew now. She wasn't waiting for it anymore. Ava did not give Richard an answer right away. She spent the next 2 days doing ordinary things with deliberate care. As if grounding herself in routine might help her think clearly. She walked her mother to the corner and back. Slow steps. Measured breaths. She cooked soup from scratch instead of opening a can. She washed laundry in the small basement room. The hum of the machines oddly comforting despite everything they represented. Each small act felt like a reminder. This was the life she was protecting. Not headlines. Not institutions. This. On the third morning, her mother watched her pace the living room. Phone in hand. You're circling, her mother said. Like you used to before school exams. Thanks for watching, Ava stopped and smiled faintly. I hated tests. You hated being judged. Her mother corrected gently. Ava sat down across from her. They want me to advise this foundation, to put my name next to theirs. Her mother raised an eyebrow. And I don't trust systems, Ava said honestly. Even the ones that claim they're fixing themselves. And her mother nodded. Neither do I. But you trust yourself. They good-vated. Ava considered that. They'll try to use you. Her mother continued. Everyone does. The question is whether you let them decide how. Ariane. Ava exhaled slowly. I don't want to become a symbol they can polish and discard. End quote. Then don't. Her mother said. Be inconvenient. Razend. Ava laughed quietly. You make it sound simple. Oh, it isn't, her mother replied. But it's clear. Is Dooth. That afternoon, Ava met Richard again. This time, it was not in a cafe or an office, but on a park bench overlooking a narrow stretch of river. Late autumn leaves clung stubbornly to the trees, their colors muted, beautiful in their refusal to hurry. Richard looked different again, less burdened, still serious, but not braced. I've been thinking about what you said, Ava began. About integrity. Well, he nodded. And I'll consider it, she said carefully, but only if it's structured a certain way. With these nows and turn zero, Richard leaned forward slightly. Tell me. Reprise. No public-facing role, Ava said. No speeches. No panels. No photos. 35. That can be arranged. Is experience. No exclusivity. She continued. If I speak for myself. Not for you. Not for the foundation. Was not her with a word. Richard nodded. Reasonable. And I want worker representation built into the oversight process. Ava said. Real people. Not consultants. He smiled faintly. That's the part they'll resist most. Then that's the part that matters, Ava replied. Richard studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Agreed. Okay, she hesitated. And if at any point I feel like this is becoming performative, I walk. No penalties, he said immediately. Put it in writing. It will be, he replied. They sat quietly for a moment, watching the river move steadily past. Elaine won't stop, Ava said eventually. No, Richard agreed. She's already framing this as betrayal. DA dated. Ava looked at him. Do you regret it? He considered the question carefully. I regret how long it took, he said. Not where it led. 09. Ava nodded. That evening, Ava received another message. This one was different. You don't belong in those rooms. You never will. She stared at the screen, then set the phone down without replying. Her mother noticed. Another one? Yes. EDES 100. Her mother shrugged lightly. That's fear talking. It always sounds like certainty. 2 weeks later, the foundation was announced. The press release was careful, restrained. Words like transparency, accountability, reform repeated with measured optimism. Richard's name appeared, his role defined. Ava's did not. That was deliberate. Inside a modest conference room on the foundation's temporary floor, Ava sat at the table for the first time with people who had never looked like her in these spaces. Lawyers, auditors, safety experts, and one former line worker from a textile plant who spoke softly but didn't miss details. Ava listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, it was precise. This doesn't work if the process is inaccessible, she said at one point. Forms no one understands aren't accountability. They're obstacles. Designs warios. The room went quiet. One man shifted uncomfortably. We'll have to manage expectations. Then. Ava met his gaze. No, she said calmly. You'll have to change them. One hasn't down. After the meeting, Richard walked beside her toward the elevators. They weren't expecting you to sound like that, he said. Like what? Like you weren't asking permission. Goa. Ava smiled faintly. I'm done asking for permission to exist. To mine it is lauding. That night, She returned home exhausted but clear-minded. Her mother was watching an old movie. Volume low. "How did it go?" her mother asked. "I didn't apologize once," Ava said. Her mother smiled. "I'm proud of you." 18. Ava sat beside her, the weight of the day settling into her bones. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," her mother said. "So am I." It growed. Ava looked at her. "You don't regret this?" Her mother shook her head. "I regret the years we were quiet. Not this." 1 later. As Ava prepared for bed, she noticed something new beneath the fear. Stability. Not safety. Not certainty. But a steady sense of alignment. Her actions matched her values. That was new. Her phone buzzed once more before she turned out the light. A message from an unknown number. "Will be watching." Ava typed back before she could overthink it. "So will I." She set the phone down and turned off the lamp. Outside, the city moved as it always had. Inside, Ava felt something settle, not resolve. Exactly. But readiness. She knew the hardest part was still ahead. But she was no longer reacting. She was choosing. The backlash came quietly. Not with headlines or lawsuits, but with absence. Emails that once received prompt replies now went unanswered. Invitations arrived without her name attached. Meetings were rescheduled, then postponed, then quietly dissolved. Ava noticed it first in the small ways, in the pause before someone returned her call, in the polite deflection of responsibility. Silence, she realized, was still the preferred weapon. She sat in the Foundation's conference room alone one evening, reviewing safety reports that had been buried for years. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a pale sameness. The documents told stories without voices, incident logs, exposure charts, internal warnings marked, reviewed, and then ignored. Ava closed one folder and rubbed her eyes. This was the work. Not dramatic, not public, necessary. Her phone buzzed. "Richard, they're trying to slow walk the recommendations." "Ava," I noticed. "Richard, some donors are threatening to pull funding." Ava leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. "Ava, because accountability costs money. Richard, and influence." She typed slowly. "Ava, then let them go." A pause. "Richard, that will hurt us." "Ava, it already hurts the people who never had a choice." Another pause. "Richard, you're right." When Ava got home that night, her mother was sitting at the table, sorting mail with careful attention. "You got something interesting today," her mother said, holding up a letter. Ava frowned and took it. Inside was a notice from her former employer. Termination. Retroactive. Policy violations cited vaguely. A clean erasure. They waited. Ava said quietly. Her mother sighed. "They always do." "Tara," Ava folded the letter carefully. "They want to scare me." "IT too." "Are you scared?" her mother asked. Ava thought about the messages, the notes, the quiet pressure, the slow closing of doors. "Yes," she said, "but not enough." Her mother nodded approvingly. "Good. Is 18. The next day, Ava attended a closed-door session with regional regulators. The room was smaller than she expected. The table scuffed. The chairs mismatched. No grandstanding here. Just people deciding whether to act. One official cleared his throat. "Mrs. Sane, Johnson, we appreciate your input, but some of these changes will be difficult to enforce." "I will." Ava met his gaze. So was ignoring them. "Was that too milder?" Another official shifted uncomfortably. "Industry cooperation is essential." That dated. Ava leaned forward slightly. "So is human survival." "I can." Silence fell. After the meeting, one of the junior analysts caught up with her in the hallway. "Thank you," the woman said quietly. "My father worked in a facility like that. He died before anyone listened." 1. Ava swallowed. "I'm sorry." "Minus Frey." The woman shook her head. "No, thank you." Grab. That night, Ava dreamed of laundry machines. Endless rows of them, spinning without pause. The air thick with dust, no one else seemed to notice. She woke with her heart racing. The memory of her mother's coughing fits sharp in her chest. She sat up, breathing slowly until the panic passed. This is what change felt like, she reminded herself. Not triumph. Responsibility. 2 days later, the Foundation's first interim report leaked. Not by accident. Ava saw it trending before Richard called. They released it without context, he said, his voice tight. Selective excerpts. It makes it look less severe. Oh, Ava closed her eyes. They're trying to control the narrative. Ain't you? Yes. With that concerned, she opened her laptop immediately. Then we correct it. Oh, how? Richard asked. With facts. Ava replied. All of them. Ever. Within hours, Ava worked with the former line worker and a safety engineer to assemble a response clear. Unpolished. Impossible to spin. They published it quietly. Directly. Without press framing. The response spread anyway. Not because it was loud, but because it was specific. That evening, Ava stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes slowly. Her shoulder still ached when she moved too fast. A reminder that healing was not linear. Her mother watched her from the table. You look steadier, she said. Ava smiled faintly. I feel heavier. It's her mother nodded. That's responsibility. It weighs something. In for it. A knock sounded at the door. Ava tensed instinctively, then relaxed when she saw Richard through the peephole. She opened the door. He looked tired, but determined. They've filed a motion, he said without preamble. Elaine's attorneys. They're alleging personal misconduct. Over. Ava's stomach tightened. Against me? Against us, he replied. They're implying impropriety to undermine credibility. Ava laughed once. Sharply. Of course they are. In quote. They want to drag this into spectacle, Richard said. Distract from the facts. Demery. Ava crossed her arms. Then we don't play. Id not resent or wealth. They'll escalate. Aye. So will we. Ava replied. But on our terms. I whine. Richard studied her face. You're not backing down. We go have again. No. Ava said simply. I didn't come this far to be scared quiet. Noted. Her mother cleared her throat from the table. If they want to fight, she said dryly, make them fight the truth. It's harder to punch. It's supperty. Richard smiled despite himself. Later that night, Ava sat by the window again, watching the city lights. She thought of the woman in the hallway, of the message from the sister who had lost someone, of the countless stories still buried. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Richard. Ava, I'm ready for whatever comes next. The reply came quickly. Richard, so am I. Ava set the phone down and rested her forehead against the cool glass. She had asked for a loan to save her mother's life. She had not asked to become this, but she accepted it. Not as a symbol, not as a hero. As someone who refused to disappear. The resolution did not arrive with applause. It arrived on a Tuesday morning. Quietly. In the form of a signed order and a set of consequences that could not be undone. Ava read the notice twice before it fully settled in. Federal penalties. Mandatory remediation. Independent monitoring written into law. A public acknowledgement of negligence. Stripped of euphemism. The truth. Finally. On record. She closed the document and sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of it pressed gently against her chest. Not relief exactly. Relief was too clean a word. This felt heavier. Earned. Across the room. Her mother sat near the window, sunlight warming her face. The oxygen tubing was gone now. Her breathing was still careful, but it was her own. Is it over? Her mother asked. Ava shook her head slowly. No, but it's decided. 8. Her mother smiled faintly. That's usually better. 8. In the weeks that followed, the world rearranged itself around that decision. Facilities were shut down for review. New safety standards were enforced. Workers who had been told for years that their pain was imaginary were suddenly being asked to testify, to document, to be counted. Some cried. Some were angry. Some didn't believe it would last. Ava didn't blame them. She attended fewer meetings now. By choice. The foundation had taken shape without trying to swallow her whole. Worker representatives had seats with real authority. Reports were published in language people could understand. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. One afternoon, Ava walked her mother through the park near the river. Leaves crunched beneath their feet. Autumn finally giving way to something colder. You know, her mother said, pausing to catch her breath. I never thought I'd see them admit it. Even at a dime. Ava nodded. Neither did I. Okay. Her mother looked at her. Do you still feel responsible? Ava considered the question carefully. I feel connected, she said. That's different. Idea, her mother smiled. Good. Responsibility without ownership is just another burden. Dizing Tupper. They sat on a bench, watching the water move steadily past. Across town, Richard packed up the last of his office. He had not returned to corporate leadership. And he hadn't tried. The foundation had its own board now. Independent. Occasionally infuriating. He didn't mind. When he met Ava later that evening, it was at the same park. The same bench. It's official, he said, sitting beside her. The investigation is closing its first phase. Tenzai Wells. Ava nodded. And the second? Will take years, he replied. If it's done right. She smiled faintly. That sounds about right. Attiga. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. I've been asked to step back, Richard said eventually. Let new leadership take over. Ivry. Ava turned to him. How do you feel about that? He thought about it. Relieved, he said. And proud. Which is new. Twos. She nodded. You did what you said you would. It's so. Yes, he replied. And it cost me exactly what it needed to Kansas. His climb. They stood to leave as the light faded. At home, Ava found a letter waiting for her. It was from the sister who had written weeks earlier. Inside was a simple card. Handwritten. They settled. It won't bring her back, but it means she didn't disappear. Ava closed her eyes, holding the card against her chest. That night, as she prepared for bed, she noticed the bruise on her shoulder had finally faded completely. No trace left. The memory remained, but the mark was gone. She slept deeply. Months later, Ava stood in a modest community center, helping set up folding chairs for a meeting that didn't carry her name. Workers filed in quietly. Some recognized her, some didn't. She preferred it that way. When the meeting began, a man in the front row raised his hand. What if this stops? He asked. What if they forget again? Ava met his gaze. Then we remind them, she said calmly. Together. That's afterward. She stepped outside into the evening air. The hum of voices behind her. Her phone buzzed once. Richard, dinner sometime? Ava smiled. Ava, as long as we talk about anything but policy. Richard. Deal. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and started the walk home. She thought of the night she had stood trembling in a living room, asking for time, asking for mercy, asking not to lose the only person she had. She had not known then how far that moment would travel. Justice had not arrived as a dramatic reversal. It had arrived as process, as documentation, as a refusal to accept silence as peace. Ava unlocked her door and stepped inside. The familiar space welcoming her. Her mother sat at the table, reading. Glasses perched low on her nose. You're late, her mother said without looking up. Ava smiled. I was busy not disappearing. Oh, her mother looked up and smiled back. Good. Ava moved into the kitchen, setting water to boil. The ordinary rhythm of life continuing. She had asked for a small loan to save her mother's life. What she had learned instead was something quieter, more enduring. That dignity, once claimed, did not need permission. And that justice, real justice, often spoke in a low voice. But it stayed. Sir. Oh my God, sir. Can you hear me?